Okay. It says we're live, so just need to confirm that the sound works. If someone can hear us,
Yep, coming through.
all right, cool. I'll play the intro. Okay, so hello everyone who's joined us or watching this after the fact. You're here with Max, Ben, and Shipman. That order has nothing to do with how we appear on the screen, in which case it would be Ben, Shipman, and Max. G'day guys, how you doing?
Okay, good. I'm excited. Yeah. Got pulled into this, so I'm ready.
Pulled in. Well, I mean, there wasn't much pulling, but I'm pretty keen. Anyway, so today we're going to chat about some FAQ type stuff. I understand is the point of this. So some outstanding questions, some questions we've had from people outside Flux, questions we have from inside Flux, etc. We've got a bit of a document up on the left, and if anyone's there, you should be able to chat, and we should be able to see that relatively quickly. So feel free to ask anything as we go along. Ben, I think you're the one that's going to be leading most of the questions. Do you have anything that you'd like to kick us off with?
Yeah, I'll just start out with the basic question, I suppose. Why is Ethereum the best option as blockchain? Because there's new options created all the time.
I like how that's the most basic one. I'm not sure the screen up there shows or reflects that exactly. Okay, I mean this is like getting pretty deep into things. We can start out here, but I don't want to spend or let us spend too much time getting off track or things like that with blockchain land, and then spending the whole time talking about that, because we definitely could. So I'll sort of be brief, and then we can maybe revisit stuff as we need.
Yeah. So just quick, probably the main thing is how locked into the Ethereum blockchain is the app and program. Like, is it possible to change it at some point if required?
So yeah, it's always like part of the design has always been to allow for moving between host blockchains.
Okay.
That's not very difficult when we think about it, because realistically, once you've got an export of all the relevant data from the old blockchain, then you just have an archive of that forevermore, and that's fine. You can use that then, and potentially successive archives, to establish a continuous history leading up to wherever it is that you're running the current blockchain, or the current voting system, sort of thing, whether that's on a blockchain or not, etc. So, yeah, there's no reason we need to be technically tied into anything or stick with any particular one option. I don't think that anything that's really an option that we have access to at the moment is particularly good as an option. In that respect, I think like over time we'll probably shift to other things, possibly purpose-built, that allow us to sort of have the flexibility that we need. Ethereum is somewhat flexible and somewhat useful, but it doesn't facilitate everything that we want. Particularly, we want a secure blockchain, which means it needs to be public, and we want high rates of transactions, which means that and we want them to be fee-free. So absolutely zero fees, and high throughput, public. I am not aware of a way to do that currently that's natively supported by a blockchain. The way that has always been possible is essentially the second layer sort of ideas that people have like built apps on top of Bitcoin with for years and years now. So that would be what I think like roughly the direction we'll not that that's the direction, but that's always a thing that's open to us if we need it. It's just a lot of effort to implement.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, Ethereum's a solid choice anyways to begin with.
Well, it's been around for like a long time, which is a pretty good plus in the blockchain world. Additionally, I'm just going to adjust my webcam here. But additionally, it's not that some of our technology is based around Ethereum. In terms of, there's like AWS stacks this is all open source in our GitHub, by the way. There's like AWS stacks where we like download parity and install that and stuff like that. There's stuff around the chain specs and setting up those blockchains so that they're like have the sort of properties that we want. That stuff's particular to Ethereum. The smart contracts are written in Solidity. There's multiple sets of smart contracts that we have, and Solidity is, largely speaking, a pretty portable language as far as blockchain stuff goes. Particularly, there's lots of blockchains they're either based on Ethereum or forked or things like that, which support it. New blockchains are supporting it. So, like, I mean, an old new blockchain, Eternity, for example, which I think was launched in 2017 or 2018. That was one of the ways that they wanted to increase adoption or accessibility of the platform, was to provide a way for people to run Solidity code, because if you can do that, and EVM code particularly, if you can do that, then the barrier to entry is a lot lower. So Solidity is reasonably portable and reasonably future-proof. Ethereum as like clients or networks or things, that sort of is a bit up in the air, but it's not a problem currently.
Yeah, cool. So I'll go back to the questions on the screen to keep it on track. To me, the distinction between Digipol and Flux is not completely clear. Like, yeah, it's not clear, so I can't really go much further into it. So I was hoping you could shed some light on that.
Yeah, so Digipol is, the way I sort of think about it is, it's a project done by Flux members, supported by Flux as a party and organization, and with light integration into some of the stuff that Flux already does. So like validation of electoral roll details and things like that. The integration is minimal, and mostly it's just to avoid doing work multiple times. Digipol is not a core part of Flux's mission. Digipol is like an auxiliary thing that is useful for us as an organization, and hopefully useful for people. It's novel, like we don't have an equivalent of it today, so that's a plus, and it helps to prove that our technology is able to do some of the things that we say it is, and it gives us a way to sort of like step up incrementally to it. So the other thing about that is probably worth mentioning is the ways, like the methods of democracy, for lack of a better term, are different. Like Digipol is there as essentially a polling app. It reflects what an electorate says in a proportional, direct way. It's pretty bog standard. There's no special magic there. We can introduce things like delegation without too much issue, but whether we want to or not is up to us in the future. So, yeah. The Flux app is, in terms of what we'll take to Parliament, and like when we have parliamentarians, that's got a different purpose. That purpose is not to find out what Australia roughly thinks on current legislation. That's a way to allow people to engage directly with the parliamentary process in a hopefully highly effective manner, a highly directed manner, and yeah, particularly something that is like has efficacy beyond other options, is a way to put it. Like that, it's got good prospects for anyone who wants to get into politics. This should be the easiest, fastest, most reliable, highest yielding method of engaging.
Okay, yeah. So they're two separate things, but Digipol sort of leverages off of some of Flux's work and is made by Flux devs, essentially.
Yeah. So the way to maybe think about it is that there is there's overlap in the technology. There's overlap in the people. Flux supports Digipol, so it's like a powered by Flux type thing, but it is not Flux as a core idea. It's a thing that we're doing along the way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Peter Shaw has said that BSV blocks are so big that zero-fee transactions will confirm. So, yeah, getting zero-fee transactions to confirm at all is not necessarily the issue. We want a timely and responsive system as well. So one of the other reasons for choosing Ethereum is 15-second block times are pretty nice on average. It's not as good as some other alternatives or potential alternatives, but it is, I think, pretty adequate to start with. In the case of Digipol, we're actually using a private quote unquote. It'll be like the nodes are publicly available. People can run their own clients. The chain spec is available, etc. It's a sort of proof of authority network is the better way to put it technically. In that there's a central authority that signs updates, and basically this allows us to have a fee-free network that doesn't get like bloated and people don't use it for other things, etc. That people can't like spam attack, but that they can audit. So that's the sort of primary reasoning behind that. And then as these things grow and develop, we'll port our systems onto like more enduring and more secure blockchains as appropriate. But essentially, if we try and do that up front, then that's just the wrong order to put things in. Yeah, that's we want a voting system, so let's build a blockchain from scratch first, as opposed to let's get something out there and figure out and incrementally improve things. The apple pie universe from scratch thing.
Yeah. So moving on from that topic, what are the current bottlenecks you guys see in Flux? Is it connected to not having enough volunteers, not having enough money, or is there some other issue that you are mainly running into?
Yeah, this is I was thinking about this when you mentioned it before the stream. I think it's a really good question. I think it's a question that I should have an answer for off the top of my head, and I don't. I can speculate a bit, but yeah, it's something that it's sort of good to know that I don't know. There's lots of, in terms of the like more general idea of bottlenecks, there's lots of things that block us. Like there's lots of things that we would like to do, but we don't have the resources, either people, money, time, etc. That doesn't answer the question though, because in the case of a bottleneck, like every system only has one bottleneck. And so while there are a few sort of things in parallel, like you can have a bottleneck in each of your projects, sort of thing. But in terms of Flux as an overall sort of system, yeah, there's got to be like one core thing. The problem with having a good answer for that, I think, is that it depends on how you perceive our goals. So our long-term goals are pretty straightforward. That's, get people in parliament, upgrade democracy. There's obviously a lot of steps in between. In terms of a bottleneck, that's going to be the thing that will stop us achieving, like, essentially the critical path to achieve, like, realizing our goals. It's hard to say exactly what that is. I think probably time for senior members is a big one. There are other things that might be able to help. Like, there's multiple ways for us to get around that bottleneck. So what I mean by that is if we have competent volunteers with useful skills, then that can help offset some of the time constraints. If we have someone give us a whole bunch of money, then some of us might not have to work like in other jobs and can spend more time on it. So there's lots of ways to sort of solve it potentially. And I think it's important not to mix up the solutions with the bottleneck. Money's not a bottleneck unless, if you were like an investment firm or something, it could be a bottleneck or whatever else, or like cash flow for a business. But that's not. It wouldn't be a bottleneck for us in that sense. It's just a scarce resource. So I think, probably time of senior members is the big one.
Yeah. But time of senior members, could that be just simplified to time to some extent? Because if you had more people working on it that are junior, that would also...
I don't think so. I think there is an important breakpoint in terms of meaningful contribution. That is to say that there is a breakpoint around where someone at the level we're talking about costs more resources to the organization than they're able to contribute.
Yeah.
So now that's not true all the time. Like, for example, on polling day, it's really, really easy to, like, it's very low cost to contribute because you just have to go hand out some flyers. That's pretty straightforward. But for like complex organizational stuff or governance stuff, or like managing like communications and issues with the AEC or membership database stuff, there's a whole bunch of elements there that are rather more complex and that like can't go wrong, or if they do go wrong, they're either quite costly or catastrophic. So they're easy to see how those particular areas would have that sort of breakpoint where there's a gap between contributing and not. The other thing is that sometimes people want to contribute with strings attached. So like, I'm okay contributing, but I want to be like, I want some like social respect thrown my way type thing. Like I want to, you know, have my photo up somewhere in a title and whatever else. I don't think that's particularly important, but some people want that. So that can be mutually exclusive with other people or with existing people in various roles or stuff like that.
Yeah, the first thing that comes to my mind, I'm not sure if this is a good idea or I'll throw some ideas out anyway.
Yeah, go for it.
Cultivating talent within the Flux team itself, because that would be an investment of effort and time of the senior members, but it would create a larger pool of talent to draw from, which would be, I know it was hard around volunteers and leaving and staying committed and that sort of thing. It's not a normal organization in that sense, but because that's what a normal business would do, is hire in the lower tier of like junior members and then build them up to higher.
Yeah, I was gonna jump in quickly and say, if, or, you know, maybe in my opinion, but we have that, like when you're trying to find where the bottleneck is, there's a few in that, like there's Flux as an organization, you know, as a political party that has boxes it needs to check and services it needs to provide to its members, and there's also like Flux as the movement or the democratic movement that, you know, people can get behind, and you know, if they're behind that, what do they do then? That isn't necessarily like a structural Flux political party thing, and yeah, I think getting that like smooth throughput for both sections, where in the party you probably need that specialized, you know, you need a skill set, you need to know what you're doing and how to use it, whereas on the movement side, it's how to get our members and people that believe in this to maybe do X, Y, and Z, or what they should do with their time, or how they should help us progress, you know, rather than needing a specific skill set, come here, do this. Yeah, so I always see the two differences there. It still doesn't give an answer of where the bottleneck is, but there's two bottlenecks. Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. Two different roles you need filled.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that answers the question for me.
One thing I would like to add though, so one of the reasons that businesses can afford to train people up and to invest in the people themselves, even though that has like direct and personal benefits to the person beyond their employment, businesses have a long period of return. So typically if you hire someone as a permanent employee, they're not going to leave after 3 months, unless probationary reasons.
Yeah.
So it makes some sense to spend 3 months of time investing in them. Furthermore, what you are investing in them is often to develop skills particular to your business or to that particular enterprise. And doing that makes a lot more sense for a business, particularly as well because there's a return on investment situation. The business is going to use them to, you know, increase profits. There's a logical reason to do it. In the case of Flux, the benefit would be that we have like increased resources or more capable volunteers or things. The cost, however, is in essence, we have to take responsibility for training people in areas that, you know, maybe they should have already known or could have learnt without us or could learn without us. We have to spend our time and resources to facilitate that, which is directly in opposition to working towards short-term goals. Like that makes sense for some long-term stuff, but it, you know, often it means that we can't do other short-term stuff, particularly because of limited time and resources. Now, there's more questions to ask there, which is questions like, if someone is not taking initiative in general with their own life, why should we put in effort to try and improve their life for them, just so we can get some benefit that might not last? Because volunteers are a lot flakier than employees.
Yeah.
So it's a very dangerous trade-off for us to try and do that. And when we have done that in the past, or done things a bit like that, it has not worked out. It's worked out worse off more than it's worked out well off. And typically the people who we find like hang around and stay involved and are really valuable are already capable people, and they're here for like personal and philosophical reasons, like they think it's important, and that gives them something more than like a job can or other things like that. Like there is a sort of, in some ways, there's like a bit of a quid pro quo in like the nature of volunteer work or like working on these sort of enterprises. What I mean by that is that, people feel better about themselves or other such things that make that worth their while. And so, when we can find people with those sort of qualities, then that's the win-win situation, the biggest win-win.
Yeah, I'd imagine that the people that are here for philosophical reasons would have the why very clearly defined in their own minds as to why they're helping the Flux project go forward.
I think most of them would say that. I am not particularly convinced that that's the case, in that I don't think that's necessarily the case for most organizations in most places.
Yeah.
That might sound a bit cynical, but I don't think people are actually particularly clear. I think they, for example, base a lot of this stuff on things like social motivations, which are not philosophical. Like just in general, social motivations aren't philosophical. They're based on like perceived like status between different people or things like that, which is not something that we can control. I would say those sort of things aren't generally like the right reasons, but they're also not the exclusive reasons that anyone has. They have other reasons that are good, but I don't think it's safe to assume that people are clear about why they want to do things like this or volunteer for any organization. I don't think that's something that people have actually spent a good deal of time thinking about to be able to answer well enough. Here's a way I demonstrate that, actually, that might be useful. So if someone did have good answers to those sort of questions, then presumably they would have thought a lot about like the purpose and significance of their actions and how to, or what actions to take to have the largest, most positive impact, that sort of thing. I would say one of the there is a foundational question to that you should be able to answer for those questions, those more relevant questions, to be answered quickly and easily and confidently. And I can ask you the question now, and I'm curious as to your response. What's the purpose of your life?
What's the purpose of my life? Okay. Yeah, that's a very big question, obviously. It depends how you, like, it comes down to your thoughts on free will as well, to some extent, and lots of other underlying foundational problems that...
Well, I mean, I can give you a helping hand here and say that there are no such restrictions in terms of I will accept any answer. You can set whatever parameters you want, you find most favorable for those sort of questions.
Okay. What is the purpose of my life?
Your life in general, living, doing things. Why do stuff? Why live? What's the purpose? What's the point?
Yeah.
If you want, you can throw it. You can phone a friend and have Shipman answer for you.
The purpose of life. There's arguably no purpose, and it's just where pool balls on a table, moving around. Like if you had enough of the information, you could predict every single movement of every single person, and then we're just arbitrarily moving through time.
So, real purpose. From a physics point of view, you technically can't. It's sort of, I get where you're coming from, The big correct answer to that is physics is deterministic over the multiverse, not over individual universes. So you can't perfectly predict what's going to happen, like to you or to us or anything like that. But you can predict all possible outcomes of all things that could happen.
Yeah, so that would mean that people are choosing outcomes in your mind.
So not necessarily, but maybe. I don't know whether they're like choosing outcomes in a legitimate philosophical sense. I don't think that it's useful to view ourselves as powerless under determinism or anything like that. I think it's worthwhile and valuable to consider that you have free choice.
Yeah, I've heard it explained as it's like two train tracks right next to each other. They move completely in sync. They're not connected, but your choices are exactly in line with what choices you're meant to make. That's one line of thinking on that, I think. But yeah,
I think that's a bit of a cop-out, to be honest.
Well,
that's just saying we've got free will and determinism at the same time.
Yeah, well, you said there was no limitations on my answer.
No, that's true. That's true. But I mean, yeah, personally, I think that philosophical like idea in general is what I'm referring to as a cop-out.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, my point with bringing that up was that I think that people should have an answer that they know, at least relatively, with relatively little thought, that they can produce for something like this. In the same way that if you study for a test or something like that, then you are able to produce many answers basically off the top of your head on the relevant subject matter. And if we're talking about matters like why would someone volunteer for an organization and contribute to something, I think the meaning of one's life, what one considers meaningful for them, is really important for that. It's foundational.
Yeah. So what would your answer be to that question?
To contribute to the growth of human knowledge, the development of like civilization, like the human project or enterprise, I guess you could call it, to ultimately move us towards a future where our knowledge is great enough to avoid a lot of the problems that we have today, to have solutions to them such that things that we like mistakes and problems that we have now that we know how to avoid, we can avoid, and that we are best able to solve problems and secure ourselves and make the best life for ourselves in future. But a absolutely key point of that is the production of new knowledge and seeking knowledge. It's really important. Without that, the rest becomes meaningless.
I wasn't sure whether to I mean, I guess not to summarize it too, but constant progress, doing something that progresses in some way. Because I was going to cut in with like the way too philosophical sort of, what's the actual phrase? Heroes are forgotten, legends never die. The purpose is like not to, or for me anyway, not to live for something, but to do something that adds to everything that's happened. And we're meant to add something that perhaps didn't exist before, or refine something, and then leave it, and the next generation or in 10 generations someone might pick it up. That's my really philosophical reason. Like, if I actually were to answer it now that I've thought about it, like I would like to add to something, especially something like this that didn't exist and is novel and completely unique to our times. But 50 years ago, whether that I think I would have wanted to add to a scientific theory or something, just to have that little. That's my addition to history, without being too over the top. I think for me that's a motivator, and why I see a big reason to get behind a democratic movement in these times that uses technology. We're in a pretty freaky epoch of time, and in my opinion, Flux, or doing some sort of digital democracy change in the world, is, dare I say, a reason for living. When there's a bit of a struggle, like what else am I going to do? Make money? Breed? Okay. Well, I've worked out how to do both of them. Let's do something new. But yeah, that's just me. I don't want to speak for everyone.
So I've just pasted something in the doc that I thought is, or I think is pretty good. Is that coming up? Oh, it'll load in a minute, I imagine, because I've just pasted a thing. Anyway, this is a pretty good summary, I reckon. So I've had answers similar to this, but not exactly this. Is this how? So, for anyone watching from home, we have a Google Doc with a special background color that makes it transparent on the thing here, which you can see if I move it around like that. The issue at the moment is that I have pasted an image that is not coming up. Can you guys see the picture, or?
I can see it in the doc, but it's not coming up on our thing.
Let me just refresh this. There we go. All right, it's coming up now. I need to change the... I've forgotten how to do it now. View mode.
It's up for me. That's enough.
There we go, yeah. So, yeah, this is from a guy called Elliot Temple, but yeah, he said, the goal of life is to live a life guided by good ideas. Good ideas come from ongoing improvement, learning new things and error correcting while avoiding systematic blockers. So the goal of life is unbounded progress for your ideas. So I think that's a pretty good answer too. But what's more important than any particular answer is the fact that someone's thought about it and has a good answer. At least something that's reasonably robust. It doesn't need to be perfect. But
yeah, better than most.
I also love that we made it 4 questions before we got to the meaning of life. Just love these Q&As.
So, unraveling the stack there, we got on that topic because we were talking about volunteers and why people would do stuff like this. Yeah. I guess, do we want to talk more about that topic, or is there anything else that you want
to... Yeah, that's probably a good topic to follow a bit further, I'd say.
Oh yeah, particularly that this is the reason that I don't think that people are clear on why they do things, this sort of stuff. So, just the way it is, but yeah.
I mean, I'll flip it back onto you, Ben, because I know, like, when I moved over to Victoria, you were, part of the team, and I just like smashed in there. I was like trying to get involved, and I don't know if you do feel the same as me, but I didn't know what to do, and I really wanted to be part of setting up the Victorian state chapter, and I wanted to do that, and then I'm like, so what do I do? And it's like, I know we had a few chats and we were trying to be like, maybe we could come together and work this, and it unfortunately never eventuated. So I don't want to say you had the same experience as me, but yeah, similar. Like you really wanted, the idea is great. How do I help? And how do I put myself usefully? It was my struggle.
Yeah, I wasn't quite exactly the same. I was similar in the sense that the idea seemed like a good idea to me. Like I was like, yes, this makes sense. That it would be better than the current system because the current system is full of flaws and almost unworkable, in my opinion. Yes, I didn't know what to do to help necessarily, but I wanted to contribute my efforts to prevent it from going backwards. Because at the time in Victoria, it wasn't registered. It was like very early stages. So I knew that things decay if you don't put effort into them. So me being a part of it at least kept it where it was, if not pushed the ball forward a little bit for whoever came after me. And then I suppose, some of these questions here came in as roadblocks for me wanting to put more effort into it, like not knowing for sure and certain that this is a better alternative than what the current system is. Because what if I put in all this effort and then it's actually a bad idea? Like I didn't do any proper checking of the direct democracy. Is it an improvement over the current system? It seems like it would be, and I'm all about decentralization and that side of the project. But yeah, I don't have clear, definitive answers for some of the questions that I need to have answered for me to want to commit my life to a project.
Okay. Yeah, because maybe that's where, like, being a politics nerd, I came in from, like, being a believer in, direct democracy or some form of the people being able to control their government. Like, that's where I came from. And then this was, if I started there, this was on the other end, and I just didn't know where the middle, what the middle actually is. Turns out, like, it's quite a lot of signing forms and phone calling people. But yeah, other than that, it was like, all right, I liked the democratic method and had no idea about the rest of it.
Yeah, I'd say my exposure to direct democracy is, just as a layperson on topic, is like Brexit, the plebiscite for gay marriage, the votes people do online for naming things, which never turn out well. Quick Google searches of the concepts don't really give any good information about it. So if you go quickly looking on Google, it's like, it doesn't give you a clear answer of if it's because no one's really doing it. Like Switzerland is doing it to some degree, but don't they pass bills and then people can
It's particularly to do with referenda and things like that. They've got a way of like initiating various things through a whole bunch of signatures and stuff. That's my rough understanding of what people are usually talking about when they refer to Switzerland.
Okay.
So they've got a few mechanisms. You can, if you get X amount of signatures, you can call. You can bring up referendums. If you have enough signatures, you can bring your idea, and then Parliament will discuss it. Or if Parliament has passed a bill, you can bring enough signatures that say we're not happy with the answer, and it'll force a referendum on the people of the country. So it kind of goes both ways, but it's not, that true. We make decision, we make vote, it happens.
So, yeah, I mean, this is like what it sounds like in essence is Switzerland has a check and balance that is via like mass public participation, and in certain cases they trigger like mass public participation in like a referendum or whatever else. So it's direct, but it's the same way that we have direct democracy in the sense of referendums in Australia. We have compulsory voting, and it's people directly voting on a thing. So that doesn't feel like really that direct. I think what people like, why they hold it up, is to do with the accessibility of that method. In Australia, for a referendum to happen, the government has to propose it. In Switzerland, this is actually a balance involved in the check and balance type system, or one or the other, or both. That's not the case here. So that's sort of interesting in that is not direct democracy. That is like a systemic relationship between different parts of a democratic system, one of which has a direct component. So it's pretty specific compared to what people usually think of as direct democracy, which is pretty broad.
Yeah. Is there any clear examples to point to of direct democracy working somewhere?
Sure. I mean, like classrooms, for example, probably have lots of examples. Small clubs, housemates. In terms of good examples of direct democracy working at the scale of like tens of millions of people, I don't particularly think so.
Yeah, there's something here as well. RuneScape has implemented, they have a voting system for updates on the game. Are you guys aware of what RuneScape is? It's an MMO, large browser-based one. And they do their voting through essentially direct democracy. People that have an account can vote on what updates they want, and the ones that get enough of a pass vote get worked on by the dev team.
Yep. So it's oligarchical in that it's exclusionary. So only some players get to do it. The questions by the sounds are put forward by the dev team. That's an important difference from direct democracy, where they should be able to be put forward by anyone. They use a plurality system. That's fine. It looks like they say options containing yes, so I don't think, like preferential and first past the post and everything else look the same with just a yes/no vote. So that's not significant. Anyway, I'm just looking at the wiki here. They have a dozen or so things a year. Oh wait, no, sorry, more than that. They've got what looks like a dozen instances a year with multiple questions in each. So this year in September, they had 8 questions. And maybe there's more. There's more.
Because there's RuneScape 3 and there's old school RuneScape, the same as WoW has done essentially.
Oh, this is old school.
Slightly, yeah, okay. I think that one's the better one from what I've...
Yeah, but this is like one of the things that, like, when considering things like direct democracy, people usually don't have direct democracy in mind. They have like their pet system of democracy that looks a lot like direct democracy but has other constraints. And they introduce these other constraints because they perceive that there are some problems with direct democracy. That's pretty common if you talk to anyone who's thought much about stuff like this in general, then they'll usually say direct democracy is a bad idea. And indeed, for lots of things, direct democracy is a bad idea. This is why Flux doesn't advocate pure direct democracy. We have like direct elements in our proposal. There is the like guaranteed direct involvement of anyone who wants to be involved, but just having everyone be involved in all issues by default, that doesn't seem like a particularly good or scalable model. There's various solutions that people have proposed that sort of halfway get there, but then they introduce other issues. There's actually like a whole host of problems people have with democracy. Like,
yeah.
And if you start talking about direct democracy, you'll very quickly realize that maybe they don't actually have a system, or don't actually have an issue with like representative democracy particularly, or with like a constitutional monarchy, or whatever else that they sort of put in there. What they have an issue with is stuff like politicians having particular types of power that allows them to have entrenched corruption, for example. I think Ben, he might have just waved, so he was off to get lunch or something. I'll have to rejigger the stuff on screen now. It's all out of whack. That's right. We'll make that smaller. The easiest way. So it's one of those things. It's a bit tricky to sort of talk about because lots of people have lots of different ideas. But in general, I don't think anyone like particularly serious about like long-term political reform is actually suggesting direct democracy, particularly because like to be suggesting something that you think is a breakthrough in terms of politics, like if direct democracy just plain and simple worked really, really well, then there would be a strong incentive for every country to have adopted it sometime, or every democratic country sometime through the 300 or 400 odd years that modern democracies have been operating. So it would have been like a disadvantage for them not to, if it was really, really good. So I don't think it's a mistake to identify that there are like problems with direct democracy. But in terms of solving the issues, they're very different from what people think they are at first glance, or when they start thinking about it, but they haven't got the ideas clear in their head yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, by the way, that's to do with some very deep and ingrained contradictions within the way that we do democracy as a like school of thought, as a I guess a philosophy with which we take action. The ways that we think about democracy are broken and bad in lots of ways.
Can you think of one example?
So will of the people is, I think, a really easy example. And one of the ways that I try and show that there's a contradiction between what people, or at least a lack of alignment between what people think it does and what it actually does, is to ask a question that's something like, I can find some slides where I've got the exact thing, but it's roughly, would you prefer a democracy that like perfectly channels the will of the people, or a democracy that makes good decisions regardless of whether the majority think it's a good decision or not?
I'd rather it make good decisions, but how do you determine good?
And that's an excellent question to ask. Lots of people throw that out before asking that question, and they cut themselves off from the potential of learning new things about how one might do that. I mean, people try and make simplistic suggestions for this all the time. They'll say things like, we need experts, or we need scientists in Parliament, or engineers, or doctors, and not lawyers and businessmen, or whatever else. Not that businessmen spend much time in Parliament. They get paid more outside it.
Yeah.
And there's no practical benefit to being in Parliament. You just get someone else to do that. The reality is that like parliamentarians have like some important skills for doing this sort of work, like being able to like think about legislation and knowing elements of the law and how things are going to interact. This is probably important for, you know, managing the legal affairs of a like reasonably, I mean, not that we're reasonably large, but populace at the very least, like 25 odd million people, Western, like rich Western nation. There's a lot of stuff to balance. We are not homogenous. We have like a great deal of technological and social infrastructure in place to facilitate like the quality of our lives. We can't do things like be careless with like various types of infrastructure if for no other reason than if we're careless and we decide we needed to rebuild something we destroyed, it's a huge waste of money. And that has there's the potential for that with like bad implementations of democracy. So avoiding those sort of things is important. At the very least, we should have some people involved who know how to do that, or at least can, you know, veto things that would do that, or whatever else. There's a lot of people with strong opinions who I would not trust to manage with competence something like this.
Yeah, I had a note about that too. It might be too.
Oh, go for it.
Pinned down enough. About the keeping the like centralization around a way out of who puts forward legislation and sort of what you were saying there, like who the people that get put in charge. How does that stay under control?
You're talking about like IBDD, like Flux's system?
Because
digital democracy?
Putting forward legislation, correct?
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh, yep, sorry, go on, finish that question.
Where will that legislation come from and how does it not become corrupt and influenced?
In some ways, I question the premise of your question. And what I mean by that is like things like, what do you mean be influenced? Like, what does it mean for legislation to be influenced?
Because when the legislation is being put forward, there'll be benefits. There'll be able to be benefits gained from putting in legislation that benefits me. Just say I'm in charge of it. I put forward stuff that benefits me in a sneaky way, or I have the power to put forward legislation, and then I do that. So
let's start with an obvious way first, because that's like the simpler case, and we can build up. So the example I usually like to use is like give Max $2 million a year from the tax budget. Like that's a bit of legislation I could theoretically put forward. The key way that this like checks and balance against obvious bad policies work is there's an initial hurdle of opportunity cost. That is that people cannot take actions like this within the system without sacrificing the ability to do other things.
That's right. They'll have to put forward their political capital to some extent, right?
Yes. Yep. So everyone gets this resource. You sort of get this like passive income of this resource that allows you to interact with the system in certain ways. And the reason that we have this, it looks a bit like money. Analogies of money work to describe the ways that it can sort of interact with stuff. It's not money, though. It's more like tokens at a fairground or something like that. In that, you know, you go in and you buy like 10 gold coin looking things for $1 each or something, and then you can put those in the machines to do stuff. That's more like what it is, except that you don't buy it. You know, when you enter a fairground, you just get it for being a voter.
Would it be closer to like a video game currency where you can earn it by playing and then
sort of, except that you can't. So not by playing, but just the practice of. It's more like that. But yeah, it's like a virtual sort of token thing. Like these just arbitrary stuff that you get. You can imagine them however you like, but the idea is that you need to spend these things. Essentially, you use them to compete with other people in the system for certain scarce resources. So it's not the type of thing where, like, if you happen to be competing with someone for the right to put forward, or the privilege to put forward, like legislation to be presented in Parliament, if you're competing with someone and they win, you don't like lose all your stuff. In the same way that, like, you know, if you're bidding on an auction in eBay, you don't lose all your money because, you know, someone else won. So they're like, these things are resources that you have to spend in order to take actions, but there's reasonable safeguards around that. So for someone to do something like propose, bad tax legislation, the opportunity cost is that they need to both acquire enough to be able to put this thing forward in the first place. I suspect that one person is not going to be enough in general, because otherwise we would have to consider how to deal with 15 million potential sources of legislation, which doesn't solve the problem at all. So it's going to be less than that. So you're going to need other people. You're going to need to collaborate to start with. But, let's say it's a business with 10,000 employees and they say, unless you do this, we're going to fire you. And they do it under the hood or, under the table, and for whatever reason that ends up happening. And they, the owner of the business manages to get a whole bunch of stuff, a whole bunch of political capital. So then they can do it. And they write a law that says, or they write some legislation, a bill that says something like, my company gets, $10 million a year from the tax office. So what then happens? So they've got to spend all this political capital to put the issue forward. Once they've done that, it's not that the issue, that's just to put the issue forward. So there's still a risk there. And then you go to an actual, something akin to a parliamentary process. In terms of when Flux is like a small minority, I suspect the way that we'll do things is that once someone has acquired a legislative or a spot, like a slot for a bill, so say that we had 10 of these a week sort of thing, and they managed to get their hands on one of them, then putting forward a bill in that slot will guarantee that it gets read in Parliament and goes before Parliament. I don't think it's reasonable for us to try and do something internal and then not put it forward because of something that we did internally. It's more consistent for us to put that forward and then to have people in our party vote on it in the same way that they vote on anything else that goes through Parliament. And that way we're consistent and principled about it. Furthermore, it means that the entire rest of the Parliament is, this happens in both situations, but the entire rest of the Parliament is also a check and balance. So usually people are talking about far future, when we only have Flux's system of democracy, issue-based digital democracy. But realistically, we should consider the near-term stuff as well. We're going to have a incremental system that can change as it goes along. We're not going to stick with one system without any changes for 20 years and just end up with something that is broken in ways that we know it's broken. If we know how to fix a problem, we're going to fix a problem. So there's that. In terms of IBDD, when that bill is, or when it comes time for people to vote on that bill, then it starts the same as every issue in issue-based direct democracy, digital democracy rather, as the name has now been changed to. Because we have there's a really, really good reason to call it digital democracy, by the way, and not direct democracy. So direct is somewhat misleading because there's delegation and specialization and stuff built in. But the reason to call it digital democracy is that not in terms of any tech, in terms of electronics or phones or anything like that. That's sort of beside the point and superficial in the scheme of things. The reason is that the idea of things being digital, as in discrete and either or in options, in essence, everything that's digital can be reduced down to yes or no questions, yes or no things. We see that most evidently with computers, where everything is either a 0 or a 1. So particularly this idea of reducing things to questions that are yes or no has been baked into IBDD since it's been called that. But there is some significant improvements that I think we can use, from philosophy, that we can use to help answer questions like, how do we do a budget? Which previously we didn't know the answer to. No one in the world knew how to do a budget well amongst 15 million people. I don't know how to do a budget well, but I think I have the beginnings of ways to start going down that path in a reliable and sustainable manner, as opposed to we'll just do some statistics or something like that, which I feel would end predictably. So once a bill gets to the point of being voted on within IBDD, then it starts the same as every other bill, and that is every valid voter is given one vote, and those are all the votes that exist for that bill.
Okay.
Now, voters have an incentive to specialize, as in to essentially give their vote up to someone else who wants it more. Why would they do that? It's because they get something in return. Who is going to give them something in return for a bill that says just spend $10 million a year on this company and get nothing back as a country? Well, the company will. The company has already spent some of their political capital in getting the bill in there in the first place. So they've had to deplete some resources just to get here. Now they have to essentially, bet the kitty that they can get this bill through. Right? They have to compete with anyone else who wants to stop them. Now, of course, one of the factors here is that for a voter, the only reason they'd give up really bad bills like this is if they get something decent in return. Like if you're just going to get, a really tiny pittance of something, then why bother? You can just vote no. And because of delegation and stuff, a lot of this it won't be people actively doing it, it'll be higher level delegates making these sort of decisions. So the company that has this arrangement or has arranged for this bill to be heard, they need to compete against everyone else in the democracy to try and get 50% of the votes to push this thing through.
Yeah. So what could they give to incentivize people for their votes?
Political capital.
Political capital, okay. So the company would have to give up more political capital to spread it out to the people to buy their votes or get their votes. So they're putting the kitty on the line for $10 million a year.
Yep. So particularly the way I think is a good way to start in terms of doing this whole thing is essentially 5 auction blocks of 20% of the votes each, one for each day of the week. The reason that it's really important to break them up like that is because it forces people to show their hand earlier. They can't just come in at the last second on an auction that's for 100% of stuff. They have to acquire stuff earlier on. If they try and keep their hand hidden for longer, then other people who want to, defeat the bill can get, potentially 40% of the supply on days 1 and 2. And then they only need to get 10% more on the last 3 days to be able to block it. So basically, by spreading it out like this, it's really, really tricky for people to avoid giving away good pricing information to the market, is the way of saying that, is that people have, via their actions and interactions with the system, they signal their intent. That is whether they want it to pass or fail. That provides information to everyone else. If you try and game this system with timing and stuff like that, then it's very easy to lose. You might be able to do it on the first round, but then the cat's out of the bag and there's 80% left. So the ability for issues to arise because of that first day is vastly reduced compared to having 1 or 2 auction periods.
Yeah, and people would be able to see the results as it goes along.
Yep. No, with auctions, with stuff like this, everything is public. If you're taking action on behalf of people, you're promoting something for the country, the direction. This is not a situation where secret ballot is particularly important. Secret ballot is important when individual people can be coerced, particularly in a ad hoc fashion, as they're coming up to the polling booth and there's thugs outside. And it's a way to prevent that sort of coercion. It doesn't prevent long-term what some people would consider coercive forces in society or stuff like that. I don't think you can realistically do that. I think as well you had a question about media at some point that you mentioned that might be relevant.
The media is some people. This was sort of from Dahi's chat in his video.
So
that same issue was brought up. Yeah,
I think we started off this branch with a question, which was, I think I asked, what counts as influencing?
Yeah,
to influence legislation. What I wanted to get to out of that, that we sort of got a bit sidetracked from, but the thing that counts as influencing is the same thing that people do by criticizing bad ideas, by suggesting ideas, by talking to their friends, by doing something that they feel passionately about and standing on the street corner with a megaphone. Doesn't matter whether you agree or disagree with them, that's influencing. People talk about stuff like banning lobbyists, right? Well, guess what? Those like single person, or like I was going to say single person businesses, but like sole traders who go and talk to officials like either parliamentarians or councillors or whatever, legislative assembly folk, they're lobbyists too. Anyone who tries to convince a politician of anything is technically a lobbyist. Donations, there may be an area where we can see some distinction between groups there, but lobbying is just advocating directly to politicians for stuff. So,
which is what we want people to do.
Banning lobbying doesn't work. Moreover, it's unclear what lobbying would look like in a highly decentralized system where the actors who are taking place in any particular issue can change like day by day and all around the country and all kinds of things like that. Like one of the things that enables lobbying is long-term positions of power that are general, spread over a wide area, where there is, like in many cases, carte blanche, like do whatever they want sort of thing. This often happens in like regulatory conditions instead of legislative, because regulation is something that can be, under some conditions, changed much more easily than legislation. So, for example, like there are, so an organization like the AEC, for example, the Australian Electoral Commission, they have like parts of the AEC's rulings are in essence as good as law. Like there's nothing you can really do to challenge them besides go to the High Court, which is the same way that you challenge a law. So there's a lot of soft sort of legislative forces that we have that aren't bills, and they're things that aren't in Hansard, essentially. There are other sort of aspects there. I don't think people quite realize the scope and difficulty of eliminating those sort of things in general. A lot of that happens in the executive branch and not directly to politicians. So you can't vote those guys out. Direct democracy isn't going to change any of that. At least if it is, it's going to be indirect. Like that change will be indirect. It's not directly solving the problem. It'll be due to outcomes of outcomes of outcomes. So I mean, personally, I think that the way that I've put it for the past few years is that the biggest problem in democracy is static majoritarianism, which is a short word and a big word, which basically means the set of people making decisions does not change issue by issue. It doesn't change based on subject matter. It doesn't change based on the day of the week. It changes based on like a 3-year term. That is, for those 3 years, you have, some exceptions aside, you have a majority government, typically, and they can or at least some of the time, do what they like. You can end up actually with particularly good, like productive situations with minority governments, because they have to do a lot more work to get things through. So they can't just, say whatever they want and do whatever they want. They've got to, actually satisfy some other people. But even then, that's arguable whether any of that's good or not. Productive is not necessarily good, particularly if that legislation gets removed in 3 years after the government changes. But yeah, so anyway, these issues I think are much broader and deeper than people typically consider. It's not to say that I have all the answers, but I think that in general, these are some pretty subtle problems, and the evidence that we don't know the solution is that no one solved it. So what that means particularly is that there is a lack of solutions from people with high status, from people who are wealthy, and from like existing political enterprises, including lobbyists and things like that. I say high status in there because that includes things like academics, or public intellectuals, or opinion writers at newspapers or stuff like that. Not us. We are not considered high status in the eyes of Parliament. So we're allowed to still have a solution that works without, like, that criticism doesn't apply to us because we're not in a position to actually implement something, and people disregard us for bad reasons. That is that someone's like status or perceived status has nothing to do with the quality of their ideas.
It takes a lot of work to even figure out what you are saying to begin with Like I have to invest a lot of time to hear what you have to say about these problems.
Oh yeah, think about if the government. Oh, sorry, I cut you off there.
No, you're right.
Think about if the government seriously tried to. I mean, why the government would particularly do this is maybe a question because it's not necessarily in their interest, but as you know, a group of employed parliamentarians. But think about how hard it would be if you went through like everyone's ideas for what to do about political and social problems relating to democracy. That is a very big, long list, and most of them are bad and not very well thought out. So I'm not surprised that this is a shortcut that people use, but you know, it does mean that we claim to be the baby thrown out with the bathwater as such.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure where to go from.
No, that's all cool. Yeah, these are like some of these issues are large enough that it is very difficult to think about, and it's not something that's very easy to think about in a short space of time. That is
also,
that. Yep.
Thinking in a vacuum also cause problems. Like it's not actually, it's all theory until it's implemented in the real world, and when things don't work as planned.
I have an issue with that. By that logic, like I mean, pun not intended. Like general relativity was like in a vacuum for 60 years until we had some like strong experimental evidence for it. Essentially, why did we believe that it was true for 60 years before that? Like it wasn't like, you know, general relativity was proposed in 1915 and everyone was like, "Oh, cool!" Like, can't wait for the day when we can show that that's either true or false. But until then, we'll just ignore it. No, it was like, you know, foundational to physics long before we were able to like provide or to do like really fine-grained experiments that allowed us to rule out a lot of other possibilities. So particularly the easiest one I can think of is GPS satellites. So when GPS networks started going up in the 70s, they had two modes of operation. One was for a universe with general relativity, and one of them was for a universe without general relativity. And the timing information had to be incredibly precise, and it was significantly different between those two options.
Yeah.
As I understand it, I think they were sent up in general relativity mode. I don't quite know that for sure. But they definitely operated in GR mode. Like at that point, we still, you know, there was still, you know, reasonable doubt because we hadn't done something like this, like we hadn't run the experiment. In the same way, we can discuss whether systems will work or not without testing them. In fact, most things we can do this. If it was true that we needed to test things and that until we tested them, we didn't know whether they were right or wrong, then, I mean, I have, you know, this magic grass that cures the cold. If you buy a kilogram of it and you eat it, it'll solve any ailment that you've got. You don't need to eat a kilogram of grass to know that that's bullshit.
Yeah.
It's not that you've ever seen anyone eat a kilogram of grass. I presume that, you know, you probably haven't seen many people ever eat grass, or if they have, it's been like a blade and they were 4 years old. Like a single blade of grass. God, I mean, yeah, the vocabulary right there. But a bushel of grass stalks. But yeah, no one's ever been like, you know, eating a lot of grass. But you know that idea was wrong. You know that, you know, eating a kilogram of grass is not going to do anything for someone's cold. Or if it does, it's going to be super weird as to why. And that exclamation at the end there, like, why, is key to understanding the difference between a reality where we would need to test things and a reality where we don't necessarily need to test things. And that is that we have explanatory knowledge about the cause and effects in the system that are going on to produce certain results. I don't need to I don't need to feed a cat to know that in general, cats or other pets are going to like you if you feed them. Like I have ideas about how cats and pets work that mean that I'm able to predict, roughly speaking, that on the whole, pets will like you if you feed and take care of them and stuff. And if you run into a pet that doesn't meet that standard, you're probably going to know pretty quickly. I've got other ideas about disagreeable pets or violent pets or things like that and I know what to look out for to avoid all that. I never need to experience any particular pet. I don't even need to personally experience like a counterexample to all pets are nice to know that there are some not nice pets. So we have knowledge that applies to things that have not yet been realized. And we have ways and means of like planning and designing things, even though those things have never been built.
Does that matter on the field? Like for the general relativity example, physics was well, how do I word this? It's built on the heritage of other ideas before it. We didn't just invent general relativity to begin with. We had other theories prior to that.
Which type of theories are you talking about, by the way?
I'm not sure. Math in general. We created numbers. Like we had to create numbers.
I mean, yeah, general relativity relies on calculus, for example.
Yeah, so we needed calculus. And we had all these other theories. And was there any competing theories with general relativity? Or did general relativity
Well,
replace
sure.
it?
I mean, there was Newtonian gravity before that, or Newtonian dynamics.
Yeah, and that's what general relativity proved wrong or replaced and was a better answer. Yeah.
Particularly, we had various criticisms of Newtonian dynamics, particularly in the form of Mercury's orbit being anomalous. And general relativity was able to accurately describe all the stuff that we already knew, and then it was also able to accurately describe the stuff that broke our existing systems. So it sort of just directly replaced it. But general relativity was not built on Newtonian dynamics. Like if we're going down this line, the shoulders of giants that general relativity stands on. I mean, Newton's in there for other reasons, but not directly because of his idea of gravity. Any more than just beyond the fact that he'd come up with a prior solution to certain problems. So
does this feel comparable though?
That's yes, sort of because we're not talking about physics, we're talking about philosophy. And sorry, excuse me. When we're talking about like knowledge applying to the world, physics was just the first example I came up with, but we don't need to use that example. There are plenty of other technical examples, but there's also like social examples. I know that if I throw coffee in someone's face, they're going to get upset with me. Or if they don't, there's going to be something very weird going on again as to why they wouldn't be upset with me. I mean, maybe they're dead. That would be an explanation. But or unconscious or anything else. Or we're actually like underwater, and so when I try and do this, it doesn't actually do anything besides impede their vision. All of those things, I'm giving you ideas that would change the situation in the way that you think about the situation, such that you have different reasons for believing what the outcomes are going to be. Again, you don't need to be underwater to observe that trying to throw coffee on someone underwater is not going to work well. You've already got enough other knowledge to be able to make that prediction, even though you've never seen that particular situation. This applies generally to all knowledge. There are ideas that we can come up with for which we cannot make accurate predictions, like we don't know how they're going to behave, or we don't know what they mean, or things like that. Those ideas are pretty esoteric in general when they're like universally people have that opinion. Most ideas are ones where some people think it's good, other people think there's a criticism that's unanswered, or that it's bad for some reason, or whatever. What is significant about issue-based digital democracy thus far is that I have not been told any substantial criticisms that I think are unresolved, or particularly that are like unresolvable, that aren't like trivially able to be resolved via other things, like methods of doing voter enrollment, for example, might be one of those sort of things. So we can start to reason about what it might do by thinking about the system, by using the skills that we've developed with other sorts of systems that are either similar or have similar properties, and we can make predictions based on those outcomes. And that is why issue-based digital democracy exists, is because from a set of ideas come a set of predictions, and in essence, Flux is the assertion that these predictions will be good. And so those are things like we will have a higher degree of specialization, we will have a lower barrier to entry, error correction will be more accessible and faster, we will have less media influence on the way that politics is done because it becomes untenable for media to operate in their existing pattern. They would need to do other things, which is not possible given their centralization and so on. It's really easy to, when you've got like a wedge issue with an election, it's really easy to do something like heavily bias and advertise one side. And that will influence voters to a degree that you might have a significant ability to control government, which then has lasting impacts for the next 3 years or 4 years, depending on the country. With issue-based direct democracy, that's just not tenable. It doesn't work at all. That's a like face first onto the pavement strategy, because you are dealing not with a general one-size-fits-all situation anymore. You are now dealing with a situation where people can pick and choose what issues they're involved with, who they're delegating to. They can change these things at any time. The legislation that's going to be proposed is less predictable. The types of issues people are going to become interested in are no longer dictated by media or political cycles. They can be, they can come in from other places. People can take action in a rapid way that does not involve, organizing hundreds of thousands of people to sign a petition or doing protests or things like that. We can be a lot more civilized about the way that we do these things. We can have a big political movement entirely from the comfort of our homes because no one ever needed to go outside. There was nothing important to do outside to make that happen. What mattered was A, what people think, and enough people thought it. B, the process that those people used to come up with legislation and form the ideas and etc. C, how everyone else views it. Whether is it important to engage with? Is it important to stop? Does it look good? And they, it's like they could go either way, so they'll just go do other things and not worry about that issue, etc. It becomes a lot more expensive for someone to try and co-opt the political process in a one-size-fits-all way that currently is possible.
Yeah, just rolling back to when you listed the problems that we already know about, like the media bias and the other influences that are happening. Would that be the prior knowledge that you were talking about that we can use to, because if we know that IBDD fixes those problems, it's a better answer to the...
Well, it's conjectured to fix those problems, but I mean, arguably, IBDD is not developed enough for us to say with any great degree of certainty. At this stage, it's we think this will be the case. And the reason for that is essentially that to make a claim like that, that's a really big claim. It's you saying, over the past 2,000 years, we've struggled with this issue, and now we have a way to solve these things that have plagued like many, many people for a long time. I would not expect people to just be like, sweet, that sounds great, take my money. There's a lot more questions and answers and other things to go on first. And I think that's very fair. However, I also think that a lot of the engagement we've had on these sort of issues so far has been very repetitive and not very enlightening for anyone involved, basically.
Yeah, and that would be, sorry, just for the theory and the practical putting it into practice. So you're saying you have the methods to figure that out before it goes out into the real world.
What are they?
Those methods would show that you can fix those problems, correct? Or I'm still a bit confused about that.
Well, part of the issue here is that we have like many theories to argue that we can solve lots of problems. So particularly, we can say that like we predict that our system will behave in these sorts of ways. That's based on knowledge about people's incentives, about the way they deal with like cost trade-offs and things like that. The fact that most people don't want to spend time and energy doing something they perceive as low value, so that we'll have delegation. The fact that people who are specialized and interested in various things will like see this as an opportunity and seek to use it. That'll be, a bit of an ongoing process. So there's all of that sort of stuff. There's other things about theories about the way that we can interact with Parliament and interact with people on either side, so the way that we can use proxies. There's theories about the way that like computer systems and like money-like systems, ledgers of some kind, which, by the way, voting is already a ledger. That is, you have a bunch of names and a value next to them, which is 1, and then at the end of it, you get a bunch of like outcomes, not with names, but with other IDs, and you tally them up.
Yeah.
It's not the type of ledger that we see accountants having, but it's a ledger of some form. So there's theories about all that kind of stuff. There's theories about economics involved. There's theories about like the reactivity of systems. So how will this, come back to affect itself? Which, maybe there's interactions there that are, because those sort of interactions are really, really hard to predict. I think control systems is like the mathematical field. And you get a lot of like non-linear, highly chaotic, almost non-deterministic style systems. Potentially actually non-deterministic. I don't know. I haven't studied it. But the point is that you get things that are hard to predict.
Yeah.
So there might be things that we can't solve absolutely, but that's okay. We don't need to solve them absolutely. In the same way that, sorry?
Just needs to be an improvement on what our current answer is.
Yes. In essence, we need to make like incremental progress and solve for more of our problems and to meet more of our goals. That's what's significant there.
Yeah.
So,
our being the country, our problems being the country.
I'd argue it's a lot more general than that. It's humanity as like an enterprise. But yes, but also on smaller scales like our country, or in the microcosm that adopts it. But in general, if this was just a country level thing, I would think it pretty pointless, and the fact that it was only a country level thing would be evidence that it is not general and thus not worth pursuing.
Yeah, so the goal of Flux is global in the end.
Yeah, it has to be.
Yeah, okay, that makes
anything else is to acknowledge that we're wrong, and that we know we're wrong.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, yeah.
Is that for Australia? It only works here. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
There's like things that can be restricted in scope. Like, for example, before the group voting tickets were removed federally, there was federal WA and Victoria that were like pretty fertile ground for us being able to get elected with a low barrier to entry. The Greens love burning ladders, and so they burnt the ladder they climbed by teaming up with the coalition to remove it. We are in less of a good situation now. So there is like arguments of scope in the sense that there are things that are particular to us that can make things better or worse. But in general, the conjecture is that IBDD works for all people in all places, provided that they have like they're sufficiently sophisticated as such. In that, it's pretty obvious that if you take it to hunter-gatherers, hunter-gatherers won't know what to do with democracy. There needs to be like an incremental process of like as people have greater and greater technology, they also need to become better and better thinkers, roughly speaking. And if there is anything to worry about our society right now, I would argue that it is to do with the quality of people's thinking. And particularly, a big problem is that half the people think that the other half are dumb, when the reality is more like,
everybody's dumb.
There are an incredibly small number of people who are exceptional thinkers on the planet. Like, very, very small. Like in terms of our understanding of humans, the brain, genetics, etc., there is no reason that people can't generally learn to be exceptional thinkers. There might be some like outlying sort of cases there, but in general, there's no particular reason that people can't become good thinkers. Contrary to popular belief, becoming good thinkers is about, or the analogy is bodybuilding, not, how is it put? Eli Goldratt has a good quote on this. It's about geniuses and things. Do I need to... So I found some quotes. It's from The Choice, 2008 book. So he gestures impatiently. This is it's from the perspective of his daughter, having a conversation with him.
Okay.
So Ephrat is the daughter, Eli is the father. So he gestures impatiently with his hand. She starts off, why is it so difficult for people to admit that they don't want an easy... he asks, why is it so difficult for people to admit they don't want an easy life? He asks. Because they do want an easier life, and living a meaningful life is so difficult to reach. He gestures impatiently with his hand. There are many ways to make it more attainable. It only requires one to think clearly, to think like a true scientist. Then she replies, in other words, I say cynically, you have to be born a genius. He immediately responds, no, you don't. I was not born with any exceptional brain power, and I have my IQ results from my youth to confirm it. I am a bodybuilder. Practice, 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 Efrat. When will you realize that you, like every other person, have enough intuition and brain power to think like a true scientist? He begins the next paragraph. I don't buy it. So this is, an ongoing dialogue between them there. Anyway, Eli Goldratt has made multiple significant contributions to economics and things like project management, and some other sort of related areas as well. Particularly, absolutely changed the ways that manufacturing and things are done, and those sort of systems are analyzed in order to increase productivity, decrease overheads, etc. That's via theory of constraints. The Choice is a 2008 book he wrote, or he and his daughter wrote, which primarily concerns philosophy more than anything else, and it's about how to lead a good life and what is a good life and what does that mean, etc. But I remember this particularly from it, where he says, "I am a bodybuilder," and this is one thing that, when people don't believe that they can become better thinkers, what does that do for their learning processes and for their ability to acknowledge and accept both errors and the solutions to them? What does it mean when there are problems that are brought about by their own behavior, which they can change, but they're refusing to because of this belief that they can't change, or that they're born like this, or that they're not a genius, so why should they try? They shouldn't even engage. People hold themselves back a lot, and that is incredibly dangerous because it means that they can't evaluate ideas particularly well. They're bad at judging ideas. That's ultimately a philosophical skill. We don't teach that, and where philosophy is taught, it's usually pretty bad philosophy.
Yes.
So philosophers are generally bad at judging ideas, which is worrying, because who the hell do you ask? And the answer is that, luckily, there are some philosophers who aren't bad at judging ideas. Yeah. We do have an out. It's not exclusive.
A couple of my thoughts there are that people identify with their ideas, they integrate them into their identity. So when you're attacking their ideas, you're attacking them as a person, and they respond in kind.
That is, by the way, in essence, an anti-Western value to actively do that. It's pre-Enlightenment thinking. One of the big ideas that came about in the Enlightenment, roughly speaking, I think many people have said things like this. I know that Karl Popper said something like this, at least on one occasion. But ideas die in our stead is one of the sort of quotes. That is to say, one of the great things, pre-Enlightenment, we killed people for their ideas, right? Witch burnings and all that sort of jazz. Post-Enlightenment, we had things like democracy, where we could disagree without murder. That was nice. So civilized, or as society has become more civilized, these sorts of things have decreased, generally speaking. People aren't all that good at knowing about when those old ideas are coming up in their minds, when they're compromising their thought processes and so on. They still happen to basically everyone. They still happen to me. And I've been thinking a lot about that stuff over the past few months. Doing analysis on stuff I say and things I do to try and figure out when and why I've said things that I don't agree with, or that I didn't want to say, or things like that, which happen somewhat regularly.
Yeah, it happens to most people. They just don't recognize it. Because I've been watching your tutoring sessions, and it makes me realize a lot of people aren't actually communicating.
I didn't know that I wasn't communicating. I thought I was so. Well, I mean, I knew enough to start doing it, but even that took me a while. I didn't realize how bad I was at so many things that I thought I was good at.
It's easy to happen. It can happen to everyone.
It is happening to everyone.
Yeah.
It's I would go so far to say that if you're not like actively dealing with these problems and you can talk about the ways that you're dealing with them in your life today, then they are just continuing to run amok and you don't know when or why they're happening. That's the scary thing, is you don't even know when they're happening. There's a whole bunch of stuff that are like controlled by these like deep implicit ideas in our head that we don't even know how to tell when they're active, like when they're surfacing and influencing our behavior. There are times where if you pay close enough attention to what you say, there'll be times where you will say something and you will think, I don't know why I said that.
Yeah.
It happens less with technical matters and things like that, because it's easier to stay on something like some externally grounded subject. It's easy to know why you're saying it, because if I'm explaining some idea, then I need to use these words to convey the thing. Why I said a joke in the middle of it, perhaps, that's different. When we make offhand remarks to people, often those are things controlled by these like deeply ingrained implicit ideas. That's one of the reasons we don't know much about them, is because they're not explicit. They're not in terms of words, like knowledge about science and things are. They're intuitions and like feelings of gut or things like that that we don't know how to describe. We don't know their cause. We don't know their reach, like what situations they affect us in or how they affect things. But I mean, there's all kind, like basically, social stuff is a really, really easy way to start seeing that sort of thing. It happens in other areas as well, but they're subtler. But with social stuff, there's a lot of that happens pretty much all the time, because a lot of social stuff is dominated by these ideas.
Yeah, it's easy to say things when you don't really have any real substance to the idea. Like I've heard something when you're a kid and you've ingrained that as fact for some reason, and you'll spout it out and repeat it. But then when you actually look at it, you'll realize there's no connection or substance to that idea. Like I heard, you need to have a fan in your room when you look at a screen. And I just ran with that for the last 20 years. And I was like, yeah, you need a fan to move the air around for your eyes. That must be true. But I just heard it from like a grade 2
Oh,
teacher.
okay. That's funny. Do you know about the myth of Korean fan death?
No.
I'm pretty sure it's South Korea. Let me just check. Maybe it's not South Korea. No, fan death, South Korean government. That looks about it. So essentially the exact opposite. Fan death is a belief that running an electric fan in a closed room with unopened or no windows will cause death. Despite no concrete evidence to support the concept, belief in fan death persists to this day in Korea and also, to a lesser extent, in Japan.
Yeah. See, now I don't know what to believe. Which one's true?
In essence, neither.
Yeah.
A fan has very little to do with how wet your eyes are or whether you're dead or alive.
Yeah. But yeah, it's easy to carry that as a tenet of your person and rely on it and believe it. And then when you realize it's not true, what else isn't true?
Yes. And I think people are really scared by that, and they feel overwhelmed and unable to deal with it. And like there's 100,000 problems coming at once. And so the only rational thing to do is to deny any problem exists, which is, of course, not rational at all. It's a survival mechanic, if at best. I think there are actually other more insidious things. It's not a survival mechanic at all, because you don't die if you start dealing with these problems. Something dies, but it's not you. And particularly, that is the static meme that is causing that behavior is what dies.
Yeah, and you need to...
In that you're eradicating an idea from your head, like a replicating an idea that you spread to other people and other people have spread to you in the past. And if you can overcome the irrationality of something like this and understand it, then you can prevent it affecting you. And I mean, what else is there for a meme that looks like death besides something like that?
Yeah, but people aren't taught how to do that, and people don't know how to do that, and it's not easy to do. It's a massive project, especially when you start later in life.
Memes are generally, and I'm not talking about internet memes here because they're in general not taken seriously for good reasons, but memes as the like packets of cultural information that are replicators that travel between people and are like transmitted via creative processes. Like it actually requires creativity on our part for them to operate and transfer throughout, like through society via people. Those type of memes, even though we don't have any good criticisms of them, we have like demonstrable evidence that they're there, that they're like we've had foundational stuff from Richard Dawkins, and then basically no developments, no substantial developments up until Deutsch and the Beginning of Infinity in 2011. That was apparently actually research that he had done back in the 90s but couldn't get it published, and that he tried to and was turned down, which is like just sad. And I think an indictment of academia, or the academic establishments. This is a very substantial contribution to the field and understanding of memes, because we have two different classes, or Deutsch argued for, conjectured that there were two different classes of memes. Memes that survived by suppressing our rational faculties, and memes that survived by encouraging our rational faculties. That is, that rational memes survive because they give us objective value and good things, like being able to come up with technology and cars and life extension and insulin pumps and stuff for diabetics. Like a lot of that stuff happens because of rational memes, because we know how to think. People, they have a share of both. They have anti-rational memes or static memes as well as rational memes. The anti-rational memes and static memes are the more insidious kind, that will do things like shut down our critical faculties to avoid us dealing with problems that threaten the idea. These are, so it's sort of interesting, right? You think about like this concept of like an idea being concerned with itself, of like a self-defense type thing or something or other, to prevent us from questioning it. But it's not like that at all. It's in no more is it like that than genes, genetically, that they have like a personality or intent or anything else. It's not like that. It's just simply that the only things that can survive and that can replicate in this fashion are things that have these sorts of properties, that have things that look like self-defense, because nothing else is stable. Things are either stable because they're like encouraging us to get more and more rational, in that they encourage criticism and they continue to withstand that criticism essentially, or they survive by getting us to not criticize them at all. And the strongest and best anti-rational or static memes, the strongest static memes are those which are the best and most consistent at getting us to not question them, question whatever it is that they're talking about or things like that. So there's a lot of social stuff there, like don't question adults. Like kids are told that all the time. Really, really, really bad advice. It entrenches this idea that like of inferiority, of like prejudgment, like nothing that you can say or do will have any effect. You're always going to be wrong. There are like elements of that which is basically don't tell me problems. There's also elements like now's not the time for you to talk, regardless of what you have to say. There's lots and lots of bad things that go on there. And when people have these ideas and they get ingrained, then those ideas cause them, in similar circumstances that they are in the future, to re-express those ideas, and will re-express the behaviors, particularly, that other people see and then interpret in such a way that they faithfully like replicate the idea in their own head. That is, I'm not okay, adults are right, big people are right, authority is right, I shouldn't question them, I shouldn't speak up, I should, know my station in all things or whatever else, that sort of thing. That's not to say that, there aren't, like the idea of like having a station or things can have some like validity sometimes, in that there are things that should be earned, but crucially, they're not based on authority. It's not because someone says that, it's not because they're the big boss and you're not, or whatever else. Earning that sort of stuff is like, by doing thought and having a track record and consistency and like reasons, like, basically answers to questions like, why should I take you seriously?
Being able to, why they're in that position of, and people respect them.
Sorry, say that again. I'm not sure I agree with that. I'm nodded. But
It's self-evident why they're in that position of power and why people respect them to some degree, or easy to explain.
Sorry, I don't follow.
With the not talking to adults or not speaking when you're not supposed to, transporting that to authority later in life, other people copying that behavior.
Also, like when they're in authority positions, they like enforce the same things on other people. Is that what you meant? Or sorry, keep going.
Should be clear why they're in that position. I suppose I'm not even really sure what I'm saying anymore now. Should be clear why they should be respected. Like the respect should have its own merit rather than being from.
Oh, I think I might have confused the conversation a bit by switching topics somewhat without mentioning it or without being explicit enough. That is that they're like ideas like know your station that are based around status and authority. They're bad.
Yeah.
However, there are situations where people can say things like, it's not your place to make this sort of comment, right? Which is not an appeal to authority. That's to do with like your track record or not having like earned the privilege of like, either demanding that people listen to you or of questioning something that is like private, for example, or things like that. There's plenty of reasons that people like can validly say like it's not your place to ask that question. It's just that those are not based on authority, and when they are in situations that where earning is like a consideration, that's like in the philosophical and moral sense, not in a authority or social status or expertise sense.
But I think I got confused in the middle.
Yeah. No. Sorry, that was my fault for switching abruptly.
Yeah, that's all right.
I'm glad we sorted that out though.
Yeah.
I think we're nearly at what hour 45 or so. Do you have anything that we you mentioned Cardano,
yeah.
a little bit earlier. Should we talk about that at all? I mean, I'm not.
Yeah, because it's kind of related. It's got a governance system involved for itself. I think it's currently just gone on mainnet, the Shelley mainnet, and then there's another epoch for another phase for scaling, and then they're going to implement governance.
Yep.
I think it's just local to their coin, essentially.
Oh yeah. Well, they don't control anyone else's. Usually, when people talk about governance on blockchains, that's what they mean. Is they mean an incredibly limited sense of governance. Not limited in the way that you would say small government is limited. Limited in the way that you would say crap democracy is limited.
Okay.
Let me just grab this thingy. Hold on. I'm just going to recall it. Add a browser window to the thing, so that I can bring it up on screen so we can follow along. Okay. Let me make it so I can make it bigger. All right. We'll go over the left-hand side. All right. That across a bit. All right. There we go. So, no, okay, it does work. All right, so this should roughly show up. Blah blah blah. We're great. So I mean, one of the things, right? Built for the community by the community. Right. So this is directly contradicted at some point, pretty quickly, I think. I don't want the thing to be too big, but I want to be able to get enough on screen. So because they say, read the research. Let's go have a look at this paper. Oh, look, it looks like it was built by 3 people. So built by the community for the community. These 3 people are apparently the community.
Okay.
So there's a lot. There's already the first words on the page are in essence, at the very least, partially dishonest. The most secure and decentralized governance model in the world. I don't know how they can make that claim, but okay. I also don't know why they would how they could make each of those claims individually, like secure, decentralized, and global, particularly. There's 3 claims in there that are interesting. like people don't agree on what it means for a democracy to be secure or governance to be secure. So unless they're using a non-traditional method of making that sort of claim, yeah. So anyway, let's go through and look at some meat. A model to marginalize none, give power to all, etc. So this is wrong. Consensus doesn't drive progress. Progress happens in spite of consensus. Consensus happens afterwards. Think about like evolution took how many like decades to sort of become scientifically considered accurate or like true, I guess. The best explanation we have of quantum mechanics in terms of what it means for like the universe, particularly like alternatives to the Copenhagen interpretation, the best one being Everett's many worlds, is not believed true by a majority of physicists. And yet it's the only one that explains certain things, like how quantum computers work.
Yeah, so we don't have any better explanations, but it's still not accepted.
Yep. Cardano is defined by its community. I presume it was Charles Hoskinson who wrote that line. That's a joke, but yeah. True democracy, that's a big red flag. There is no such thing as true democracy. You can say effective democracy or impactful or real is, maybe borderline, but at least, it's a thing. Yeah, true is a way to discredit anyone who either disagrees with you or any other alternate model.
Okay.
In which individuals are incentivized to play a role. Literally every system ever made incentivizes people to play a role. Just what is that role?
Yeah.
Well, it's just what I'm meaning here is this is language designed to sound impressive and not say very much. It's designed to like make people feel like there are good things here without actually arguing that there are good things. It's not explaining anything about the world or like why. I mean, we haven't even heard anything about the governance model. We've just said they're great for 25% of the thing.
Yeah.
So, change begins with one voice. Blah blah blah. It's like stuff like this, right? This is the typical like pseudo-intellectual bullshit type thing. To think loudly, you must quieten your mind, like something like that. It's utterly like it's meaningless. What does it mean beyond stuff we already knew? How does this possibly give us any insight into reality? I don't think it does. Like this, right? Decentralization begins with technology, but it's only achieved when no single entity is in control. Like, what is this sentence saying?
Technology, Shelley, but it's only truly achieved when no single entity is controlled.
What's the purpose?
The mainnet. Decentralization begins with the technology, with Shelley. Shelley was launching on the mainnet. That's what it means by the technology. But this is only truly achieved when no singular entity is involved in control. Sorry. The roadmap plan is to move away from IHOK having any part of the governance.
Okay, cool. Why don't they say that? Why did they write this instead of something else?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
I'm not sure they do.
Very possible.
The governing principle of decentralization is the redistribution of control. The Oxford English definition, or the Oxford English Dictionary, defines decentralization as a lack of centralization. Like,
yeah.
Apparently, the purpose of Voltaire, a thing that they haven't really introduced, is defined not from the middle but from every participant. The purpose of Voltaire is global networks that are defined not from the middle but from every participant. Is it to do with the governing principle? Decentralization? I mean, it's to do with every participant. This is what they mean, is that like the purpose of Voltaire is to empower every participant such that we can realize something else. But that's just not what they've said.
Yeah.
Okay, we actually get something right. So Voltaire adds the ability for the community, like token holders, to make impactful decisions, as in, impactful decisions, just making decisions about updates, technical improvements, and funding decisions. Making impactful decisions about funding decisions. Like, that's just grammatically, like, obtuse, if nothing else. Make impactful decisions about funding and budgets. Like, known as Ethereum improvement proposals. Oh, wait. Cardano improvement proposals. So these allow the future of Cardano to be determined by its community and funded, blah, blah, blah. So they'll experiment. As we discuss topics such as decentralized governments, I thought the entire point of this was that this would be decentralized governance. Why are we discussing this in this era? Does this not contradict like what they were saying about the thing that's about to go live?
Wait, hang on.
I think what they mean.
Yeah, this part's not ready. They're at Shally. They got Goguen, and then they.
Well, what's this? What's the era then? The era, like when have they talked about an era?
The era will also.
The era.
Is Voltaire the era?
I don't know.
The era of Voltaire, like the Shelley era, the Goguen era, the Basho era.
So long and distinct period of history. So the era, not just this era. This era would at least have some meaning. We would know that we were in it, but it's the era.
Yeah.
So yeah. It'll play host to some experiments. So basically, they don't mean for this to sound like it contradicts the above. What they mean is, I think, they are like, we will be talking about decentralized governance when we're implementing decentralized governance, because this is by the community, but it's also by 3 people, and they probably got some stuff wrong, so we need to talk about it, or maybe they got everything right, but we just need to convince you of it. But either way, I'm not sure this is particularly consistent as a way to, like, whatever, I mean, this is their sales pitch. Like, I think it's fair to judge. If this is low quality, then I don't think there's a good reason to believe that their system is going to be great. Not to mention the fact that we're halfway through the page and there's nothing about dynamics, besides the assertion that dynamics exist, on the, like, in the system. Evolving Voltaire from research to reality. Shelley is... Yep, sorry.
Did you get to that page from the one I linked?
It might be because I have a small window.
Okay, possibly.
Yeah, does this look like the one you've got? I mean, it's over the entire...
Starts with the Voltaire era of Cardano will provide the final pieces required.
Where is that?
Yeah, mine looks completely different.
I'm just Cardano.org/governance.
No, mine's a roadmap.
Oh, I think maybe I just googled it, and that's why. Where's it gone? Let me make this
doc again.
Window smaller. So, yeah. Did I just Google it? Yeah, I just Googled it and clicked the first link.
.org, same website, just different location, I think.
No, technically different website. It's got a subdomain. All right. Oh wow, this is nice and tiny text, great for streaming. So, Voltaire era of Cardano. Are these mutually exclusive with other eras?
Yeah, there's the Byron. We just went into Shally, which was the beginning of decentralization, and because it's a proof of stake coin, so people started hosting pools. And then smart contracts is next. So, I
mean, what do you think this sentence says?
For Cardano?
Yep. I can, I mean, if I share my screen with you over Discord, it'll come up on the stream as well. So there's no, but I'm using low latency, so it should be, if you're not live on YouTube, you can click the thing and it should come up.
Yeah. For the So for Cardano to become truly decentralized, that's what, yeah, I've just repeated the first line.
Yeah, that's cool.
So it requires what Shelley's given us, which is what's happening now, the pool system, people delegating Cardano. And also that needs to be increased, that capacity of staking to pools.
You mean this part? I don't think that's what this part means.
I mean, the capacity to be maintained and improved over time in a decentralized way. I
Yes.
connected that to what Shelley is doing needs to be increased.
I see this as a statement about its like capabilities as a system. Like as in, it needs, for example, like we might say that someone needs the capacity for like rational thought or something like that, right?
Yeah.
I'm just going to move the, what do you call it, camera stuff over so we've got more room. Get rid of YouTube. Yeah, so like if someone's, you know, like has the capacity for good thinking or stuff, yeah, I see this as like a statement about what this system can do. So, like, for Cardano to be decentralized, it needs like the necessary technical infrastructure, which is what we call Shelley. It also needs the capability to, like, for maintenance and incremental improvements without a central authority.
Yes.
Yep. Why did they write it like that, which was very fancy, instead of saying we need technical stuff that's in Shelley, but we also need to make sure that we're future-proof because we need to be able to maintain this thing and upgrade it, and both of those things need to happen without a central authority. Because in my mind, that's a lot simpler. That's much easier to understand.
So that's what you read from that.
Yep.
You didn't connect it to Shelley. Okay.
Well, no, because so it require not only A, but also B. The but also is, it's like linking and referring back to the not only, but it's also contrasting. So but is saying these two things are different. So that's why I'd read them as different, and that's why I replace capacity with capability, because I think it makes that more clear.
Okay, yeah, I can see what you're saying. Yeah, they're referencing something different. Otherwise, it'd be in the same. Yeah, they wouldn't say, but also if they're talking about the same thing.
Yep. So then this next part, Voltaire is the name we have for the upgrade to the network, which allows, like, you, the community, to put improvement proposals before other community members such that you can all decide what happens. It's just Voltaire is the ability for you to propose stuff and the ability for other people to say yes or no to it.
So yeah, I'm not sure exactly how it works, but that's one way to interpret it. Yeah, that's one understanding of it.
I mean, yeah, voted on, maybe there's more subtlety than yes or no, but pretty much. And then leveraging the already existing thing, so we just tie it into the stuff we've already got, sure. Treasury system, blah, blah, blah. Voting and treasury system be truly decentralized and no longer under IOHK's management. No, it will just be under the management of various staff members from IOHK who have significant token holdings.
I think part of the mechanism is being able to vote which group of people work on the project as well. So there'll be elections for who gets the contracts to service the network.
Yeah, okay, cool. I mean, to be honest, it's a fantastic exit scam in the sense that you put this stuff in place and then people vote you out. You're done. There's no obligation. I'm not suggesting that's what they're doing, but if someone did want to run an exit scam, then being voted out is like the best reason that you can possibly give to why you've been negligent. Like, no one wanted me to be not negligent anymore.
Yeah, that is an answer to what I said. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but
I mean, maybe that's not going to be the case. Maybe there's other things there. Maybe there's like their tokens are locked up with various conditions and all this sort of jazz. Whatever else. I mean, but at the end of the day, it's like, I mean, I don't have a good reason to believe them. I don't have a reason to believe that they don't believe it, like they might. But I mean, you know, in terms of, is that that's the end of the page? Okay. All right. So they told us nothing about how this system worked or why it would be different to anything anyone else would build, anyone's intuition, why it was any different to just literally having a pile of money and like a silly voting system attached to it. There's no like particular, like this page doesn't say so. There might be other stuff like here. I mean, they say like enabling a better collaborative intelligence, which is like making a philosophical claim. Like they are saying we have made philosophical ground by doing this system. It's not that we are facilitating like a known method of collaborative intelligence, like a known method of collecting ideas and like making decisions. They are saying like, you know, we have some improvement, presumably. Maybe they're not. Maybe this is like a little bit overstepped. That's what I read out of it, like enabling a better collaborative intelligence. Why would you call a research paper that if you just used other people's things? I mean, maybe not. Maybe it's actually, I mean, they start with a treasury system. Maybe it's a really boring paper about doing a treasury system.
Possibly, yeah, there's a treasury system.
46 bloody pages. A new unit vector ZK proof. So, halfway through a paper, allegedly about a treasury system and collaborative intelligence, we have a 5-page description of a zero-knowledge proof. Of a new unit vector zero-knowledge proof.
Okay, not gonna lie, a lot of this is going over my head when you're saying these.
All I mean by this is that why wouldn't they just publish that in a separate paper? Why do they need 50 pages in this thing when at least 10% of this paper is dealing with a mathematical concept that is not particularly important for what the paper's about? Like they say here, like a treasury system is a community-called and decentralized collaborative decision-making mechanism for blah 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 blah. So Dash governance system, is that what they're calling it, or is that like referring to the cryptocurrency Dash?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Sorry, that's probably hard for people to read. So they mention other blockchains like rigorous study of the treasury system, model, design, implemented, provably secure treasury system. What does provably secure mean? Like, I mean, it's probably good, but it's just like, just here it just feels like language that's thrown in. Liquid democracy, delegated voting. So do they solve any issues around that? I don't know. For better collaborative intelligence, it does not do that. Stakeholders can either vote directly on the proposals or delegate vote to experts, or anyone, unless they're going to put a authoritarian roadblock in the way to stop people claiming to be experts on things.
We have to determine.
In which case, it's an oligarchy. I hope no one from IOHK is considered an expert, based on their claim previously. Distributed, universally composable, secure, end-to-end verifiable voting protocol. So, distributed you get for free. Universally composable, I'm not quite sure what they mean by that. I know what composition is, I know what universal is. Secure end-to-end, I know, but that's pretty easy to do. There's a pretty low barrier for that. Verifiable, like everything on a blockchain. So this is the only thing I don't know what they really mean there. I'm not sure if they mean connected to other voting systems, which composable would sound like, or connected to arbitrary backends and front ends and stuff like that. As in, not UI and things. I mean, like different kinds of organizations at the back end and different kinds of voting populations at the front end.
Okay.
Like it's like composable in the sense of like you can take a normal company and employees, or you can take a blockchain and anonymous token holders, or that sort of thing. I could see that maybe as something they mean.
Yeah, okay, yeah, they can.
The integrity of the Treasury voting decisions is guaranteed even when all the voting committee members are corrupted. So, is the Treasury people, or what's the committee members doing? Do we have any mention of committee members here?
I'm not sure what committee members are or do. Unless it would be the. Yeah, I've got no. I'd just be guessing.
Voting committee selection, 3.7. So, why is there a voting committee selection in liquid democracy?
Is it connected to the Treasury? Because there's a Treasury to fund the development of the network, which is funded from transactions on the network, I think.
I mean, they were going on before about how this is truly decentralized. So one of the things they say, the integrity of the system is guaranteed, even blah. To further improve efficiency, I don't know what efficiency you're referring to because this is not about efficiency. This is about property or integrity or things like that. World's first honest verifier zero-knowledge proof for unit vector encryption with logarithmic size communication. Honest verifier. That's a interesting choice of words. I'm not sure what that means. Partial result may be independent interest. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, so as far as I can see, the entities involved in the voting schemes are a set of voting committee members, blah, set of voters. Okay, so apparently these are two different things. And a set of experts. Ah! There we go. Found the weasel.
So the entities involved in this voting scheme are a set of voting committee members. Yeah, I'm not reading. I can't understand what I'm reading.
No, I can't read it really quickly either. I mean, security is based on the indistinguishability between real hybrid world executions and ideal world executions, i.e. for any PPT real hybrid world adversary A, we will construct an ideal world PPT simulator S that can present an indistinguishable view to the environment Z operating the protocol. Whew. So, one sentence. I don't think there's any full stops in that.
Yeah.
So that's a 2-sentence. No, sorry. It's a 3-sentence paragraph. There's another stop here. The other ones have like math symbols and stuff in them, though. This has like just letters. Oh, that's not going to work. I'm just going to go do a word count quick. One of my habits is, or like habit, fun pastime. I don't know. Like do word counts of really bad sentences. So apparently that had like 37 in there. But some of those are joined together. Like the spacing hasn't. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh wait, no, 5. 6 because there's a slash. 7 for the other slash. 8 for another one. 9. There's 9 extra. Well, there's 9 spaces that are missing in this little thing that I copy pasted. So the 45 word, or approximately a 45 word. I don't know if you count the symbols. Maybe you can take some out. 43 word sentence, pretty long. Anyway, the point is, I don't think they're addressing any particular issues that are actually issues. I think they like to define things in mathematics that they don't understand and then claim that they've done things that won't actually work. It's not uncommon. This happens a lot.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Because, yeah, their main defensive claim, I guess, would be that they use science to make it okay and they get it peer-reviewed and...
Peer review means nothing. Like, peer review is only a way for us to try and, like, outsource some of the work of evaluating, is this reasonable? That's really all it does, and unfortunately, good things get badly peer-reviewed sometimes, and bad things get peer-reviewed well. Peer review is not a measure of like whether something is right. It's a measure of how much other scientists liked it. And if anyone has complaints about the way that academia works, then those are complaints about peer review as well, unless they are like particularly addressed by some particular peer review system.
Okay.
More importantly, like, good ideas start off in the head of one person. Right? Good ideas are good before they even have a chance to be peer reviewed. There is something else about them that makes them good. Peer review does not make something good.
Yeah.
Good things ideally should be... Oh, sorry. You cut out when we talk. There's a way... I remember there's something about Discord. There's a way to avoid it, but I can't remember.
There's a... Now I forgot what I said. Peer reviewing is a way to appeal to authority to make your idea good.
Yeah, potentially. Peer review is also like perfectly legitimate in certain circumstances. Like you can think of like airline safety as a type of peer review, I don't know how to evaluate whether a plane is safe to fly, but I know that like safety experts have looked at it. That is like, in terms of the airline staff and whatever else, like their particular peers have gone and looked at the thing. It's a bit more particular than general academic peer review, but same sort of principle in that we're using a shortcut via someone else's assumed competence and thoroughness and things like that, which is okay. We just have to know that it's limited, and particularly, like saying like, why do you feel okay flying on this plane, and saying because I'm confident that the airline safety people have done a good job, that's perfectly fine, right? Saying like, why should you believe that this paper is correct, in the same way as saying like, or like, I am going to tell you this paper is correct because it's been peer reviewed, is the same sort of error as me saying like, I'm going to like tell you that your plane will never fall out of the sky because some guys checked it. We know that occasionally that happens where planes fall out of the sky. As it turns out, academic peer review is a hell of a lot worse than airlines and airports. They have a much, much better rate.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, look, if peer review was really good, psychology wouldn't be really bad.
Okay.
Like, psychology needs some serious, like, rejiggering. It is so bad at making progress.
Yeah, and there's like multiple schools of thought to some extent competing at the moment still. Would you agree with that?
There often is, like, schools of thought are something that's like, I mean, I don't know enough about like modern day psychology to know what, is a school of thought or like what scopes those things apply to. Because there's stuff like, there's like counseling type psychology where you've got like, CBT as a school of thought or whatever else, cognitive behavioral therapy. But you've also got stuff about like, animals and behavioral scripts, and short-term memory and like visuospatial sketchpad and stuff like that, in terms of like how we deal with, like the last half second of visual information. Like, I don't think there's particularly much, I don't know, if the idea is contentious or whether there's other research or whatever there, but psychology is pretty big. It's just also pretty scattered and pretty disorganized because of that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I mean, this is not a good, like, I was not particularly good at writing at this point, but let me like compare for a minute between, let's have a look at like, this is, a 40-minute read. It's like, I don't know, 8,000 words or something, 1,000 words maybe, of like something I wrote about IBDD.
Yeah.
Particularly embodiment of Popper's criterion. It's like, this is philosophical. This is about why it works. So, there's like, and there's lots and lots of issues with this. So, like, I know that there's lots of issues with it. I was not particularly good at writing then, and I intend to rewrite it one day. So, but if we like just flip through here, so IBDD is a system for correcting mistakes. So, necessarily acts over some period of time. There's various questions. That's an aside. Popper's question, blah, explained in general quite well, or blah, blah, that's just background. Stuff about exclusivity of systems like conjecture and criticism, so there's mechanics and at least some discussion of that in there. The case about like different parties, there's like further down, like here, there's like particular examples of like what type of situations are going to arise between like two interacting sides about any one issue. What are the incentives? How do they act? And basically, the paper's making a point. Like we've seen that, not only does IBDD satisfy Popper's criterion, but also embodies many of the core philosophical conclusions Popper came to when thinking about the problems of progress, authority, and knowledge. Now, I definitely didn't have, in terms of stuff like talking about like knowing your station type thing and earned, or having things that are earned that are valid. Like when I wrote this, I had not like earned the right to say this type thing. I did not know enough about philosophy to make that sort of claim. Even now, I can't really say that now. Like I would have to, actually seriously study Popper before I could say that. I don't know like what the philosophical conclusions Popper came to. I mean, I've been told roughly what they are through other people, but it's not like I have actually read them. It's not like I know them in great detail.
Yeah.
I have a gist.
Yeah.
I know a bit about his philosophy because people have told me, not because I've read his stuff or I like deeply understand it. So, but the point is that I'm making an explanatory case for why this particular system is capable of doing things that other systems aren't. why this will lead to good results where other systems will not lead to good results. Cardano's paper is about zero-knowledge proofs. It's about, like, bad actors, like, I don't know, I didn't even know what the, securing the thing against me, all actors are corrupt. Like, why are these actors able to be corrupt? Or would what authority do they have in these sort of situations? Like, there's a lot of this sort of stuff, but it's not like, it's sort of like we're just disabling one method of attack is sort of what it feels like. It's not saying that we have constructed a system that will get better outcomes. It is saying, like, we've figured out that people can be corrupt, so we're going to try and mathematically prove that this system doesn't allow people to be corrupt. Now, of course, the problem with that is that what do you measure that against? Well, you've just got a direct democracy over here. A group of people whose involvement in the democratic system is decided by the amount of tokens that they hold in the economy, where they will be directly affected by the outcomes of these decisions.
Yes, and I think the thought is that because you have a vested interest, you act in your vested interest.
I'm glad that someone's figured out that all people are actually rational after all and understand everything before they even, consider stuff and whatever else. Like, I mean, yes, people will roughly try and, like, not destroy their own wealth, but there's actually significant issues with this sort of thing. Thinking about it, I'm not sure we have time to do it now, particularly because I have a rather urgent need for the other room.
Okay.
But I do feel like it's maybe a good place to wrap up, though. I don't think we're not breaking particularly new ground there. I know enough about this now that I don't think that there is any substantial progress philosophically in that paper. Maybe there's cryptographic progress. Fine. That's not what the paper was apparently about.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that is what it is.
Yeah. I don't think I have really any other pressing issues, and I think we covered a decent amount of ground.
Yeah. No, I think we did. It was definitely I didn't didn't imagine that we'd go for this long, so I was quite happy with that.
Yeah. What is it now? Like 2 hours ish?
2 hours 20.
Oh wow. Time flew.
Cool. All right. Well, we should wrap it up. Probably go get some lunch or something else.
Sounds good.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Ben. Catch you next time.